Good afternoon. Happy December 19th, 2024. Welcome to the Independent Sector December monthly policy update. I see people are joining right now. We'll give you just a moment to get settled, refresh your email and your coffee this afternoon, while we dig into everything that's happening and everything that's not happening on Capitol Hill and in Washington, D.C. In a minute or two past the hour, so why don't we dig in, and we will be sure to pause for questions regularly throughout. So again, I want to welcome you to Independent Sector's monthly policy update. I'm Ben Kirsch. I'm the Director of Public Policy and Government Relations here at Independent Sector. If it's your first time on an IS webinar, I want to welcome you. We're a national membership organization of charities, foundations, corporate giving programs, all working together to make sure people living in the United States thrive. As part of our webinar feature, your lines are muted, but you are welcome, even encouraged, to drop questions in the Q&A. We will also do our best to keep an eye on the chat as well. Before we start, I want to respectfully acknowledge I'm joining you today from Washington, D.C. It's the ancestral home of the Piscataway people. They're still in the area working to reclaim their land and their traditional practices. Also, many of the buildings and places we inhabit in Washington, D.C. were built by enslaved people. Wherever you're joining us from today, we're really glad to have you, and we will share all the information we know about what's happening this afternoon. To help us do that, I'm really glad and grateful to have Wes Coulomb joining us today. Wes is the status of government funding at this moment. So we're going to dig into that and a few other issues today. So I'll turn it over to you, Wes. Tell us what's going on.
Well, thanks, Ben. Yeah, bit of an exciting time with the Congress trying to finish their overdue business for the year and get out of town for the holidays. Maybe just kind of let we know kind of where things are at the moment on the big issue with the CR. As you know, Speaker Johnson was trying to avoid doing a big omnibus appropriations package like we've seen in the past, and so they agreed to do a short-term extension of the CR into middle of March into next year. So he negotiated with Democrats on a bipartisan package in the House, short-term CR, about $100 billion in disaster funding, some funding for farmers, another number of other healthcare extension provisions, and then other items kind of added onto that package, if you will, to get them the votes necessary to pass the bill out of the House was the plan, and then send it on to the Senate. We had a late-breaking insertion from President-elect Trump and some folks in his orbit to kind of halt the progress of that bill and to put more things in the package, namely to add an extension of the debt limit to that package at President-elect Trump's insistence. As you may know, the debt limit expires on January 1st. It's kind of temporarily extended repeatedly by Congress and kind of pushed that date out. The debt limit then comes due on January 1st of 2025. The Treasury Department has the ability to kind of move money around to avoid hitting that limit, usually around 4 to 5, maybe 6 months potentially into the late spring, early summer. Not sure the exact date, depending on the finances of the federal government, but that's kind of where things are. So that has kind of put a halt to proceeding with the bill that they released the other day, and kind of put negotiations into high gear to figure if they can add a debt limit extension to that package and still maintain the votes necessary to pass it to the House and the Senate. I think, so meetings are ongoing with the Speaker's office, various members, Republicans, Democrats have indicated they will not, be supporting a clean extension of the CR, for example, is another option on the table. And not doing the overall larger package. I think if you drop the disaster piece in particular, you're going to get some of those states who need the disaster relief upset and walk away. So I think they're trying to balance what they can get, what can they do to the package that was released to maintain the votes on both Republican and Democrat side to get the bill through the House and the Senate. As of now, folks I've talked to, just recently, this morning, senators and others, they just kind of don't know where this might end up and kind of where it's going. I think still negotiations are currently proceeding and ongoing with members and staff on figuring out a path forward. Obviously with the CR expiring tomorrow at midnight, we could see potentially a shutdown. So the kind of scenarios here, I think, as I see it, are one, a potential shutdown of the federal government for a short period of time. I think that's, obviously possible in this environment, maybe not likely. You could also see a short-term extension to give them more time. They could pass that very quickly tomorrow evening in the House and Senate potentially to extend, the date a little bit to give us more time to negotiate. And then the third, obviously, is what they're trying to figure out if they can get done is kind of rework the package that they released this week with some additional modifications to it to then have the votes to pass it through the House and the Senate, namely with the debt limit added to it to pass it by some Republicans and President-elect Trump, his team. That might give the Democrats the ability to ask for other things in the package to help balance it out. But we'll see. We'll see what that leads to. So, as of now, I think that things are still pretty murky and still unclear as to what they could get done and when they'll get it done. Obviously, they do have about 24 hours or more to figure it out into the weekend potentially. So we'll see how that plays out. Wish I had more and better news on the details, but that's kind of, I think, where things sit. So something to watch as they move forward in the dynamics of both the House and the Senate. I really think it's probably going to end up starting the House and senators are really kind of waiting for the House to figure out their votes and then send it over the Senate for, my guess is whatever the House can pass is likely to be, passed by the Senate. They can get a bipartisan deal in the House. The other news of the week was they did finally pass the National Defense Authorization Act through both the House and the Senate on its way to the president. So another big item necessary to get done was completed and done. Another thing that was on the list, it was part of the CR, was an extension of the Farm Bill. I would expect that to also kind of be maintained any deal they put forth in CR as well. So that's kind of where I see things standing at the moment. Maybe some updates. Oh, go ahead, Ben. Any questions?
Yeah, let's pause for questions on that, Wes. I know there are a few other things that are less headline that we want to make sure to update folks on, but please do submit questions in the Q&A. Again, you can use the chat if you like. So a question for you, Wes, and right, there were a lot of things in the CR, perhaps a surprising number, I think, to many people who watch closely, even many members of the House Republican caucus. So for things that were in there, right? You mentioned the Farm Bill extension, but also disaster aid writ large, disaster aid for farmers, right? Some of the pharmacy provisions, the RFK Stadium and the pay raise for members. Each of those provisions probably faces, kind of its own path, but is there a presumption that they're kind of starting from everything in and they're winnowing it down, or are they starting from the 8 pages it takes to keep the government open and building back up? Like what's your sense of kind of the mechanics of how this deal might come together?
Yeah, I think that they're wrestling with that very question, and I think that does, start with the overall package, right? Because, while they potentially could pass a slimmed down bill that only has Republican priorities in it to the House, that would then face objections by the Senate. And obviously, President Biden is still in the White House. He has to sign it. So I think that the administration and President Biden is in the negotiations on what they can get done. And so I'd imagine it's not going back to square one, but kind of taking the deal that they had agreed to or tentatively agreed to on both sides and figuring out how they can kind of make changes to that to pacify the concerns and also maintain the votes, right? I mean, Speaker Johnson is in this tough situation where he's also trying to walk a fine line to make sure he doesn't lose votes to become Speaker on January 3rd when it comes to actually voting him in to be the Speaker for the next Congress when Republicans control the House and the Senate and the White House. So I think he's also kind of very mindful of that, as you've seen kind of Republicans, conservative Republicans, raising concerns about how this has been handled and kind of that sort of thing. We'll see at the end of the day how they actually vote and what happens. But these CRs, appropriations bills, really have to have bipartisan support to get it through the Senate and the House. Even next year, right? And the Republicans only have 53 votes in the Senate, and so in order to pass appropriations bill, you need 60 votes, and so you still need bipartisan buy-in even for next year on the appropriations process. So that's kind of where I see things going. What could be in or out? Usually this situation there's more of an additive process to buy the votes rather than subtraction. But we'll see what they can come up with to kind of get the votes. It might take them some more time. That's why I said that, options on the table as far as shutdown or a temporary extension before they have the deal put together. But we'll see what happens next 24 hours.
Thank you, Wes. Up to the minute, we know. Um, Tom Cole, senior appropriator, who's been in the room, the speaker's suite for the better part of the last 24 hours, was laughing and joking to reporters about how little he knew about how this was going to play out. So maybe he's a better poker player than some of us, but certainly a lot of things in flux. So we'll pause one more time for questions on that, but before we do that, right, it is December in an even numbered year, and so Congress and congressional committees are getting set for their leadership and making some decisions about membership in some of those committees. So Wes, can you give us a quick recap of some of those updates in the last couple weeks as well?
Yeah, so the steering committees in the House and Senate have been meeting to talk about, who is going to run the various committees in the House and the Senate, and then appointing new members to those committees, given the vacancies, post-election, those retirements, and those who lost seats, for example, in the House. And so, I think that they've kind of settled on, the committees that we following the tax space. The Senate Finance Committee will be chaired by Senator Crapo from Idaho, and the ranking Democrat to be Ron Wyden from Oregon. In the House, we expect Jason Smith to maintain his chairmanship of the House Ways and Means Committee, and Richie Neal of Massachusetts to be the ranking Democrat of that committee. They did also announce new additions to the Republican roster on Ways and Means, given the retirements and changes in election. So you have Representative Bean of Florida, Representative Miller from Ohio, Representative Moran of Texas, and Representative Yakim from Indiana are the 4 additional Republicans to be added to the Ways and Means Committee next year in next Congress on January 3rd. We're still waiting to see the additions or changes to the Senate Finance Committee. We had several Democrats retired, and then Republicans are going to take over control of the Senate Finance Committee, so they should have additional seats there as well. And generally those on the Republican side, the Senate Finance Committee, for example, are appointed by the first vacancy is appointed by the majority leader. In this case, incoming majority leader, Senator Thune. And then the next one is by seniority on the Republican side. And the Democrat side is generally appointed by the majority, the Democrat leader. In this case, Senator Schumer will be the minority leader in the Senate next year, and through mostly by seniority as well. But we'll have to wait and see how those picks shake out for next year. And then obviously, Ben, you have on the administration side, right? President-elect Trump has already kind of put forth his nominations for the various cabinet positions and some of the sub-cabinet level spots. They're making the rounds on Capitol Hill, and those will start in earnest in January. As tradition holds, and we're making those. The committees have to have hearings, and they'll have a committee vote, and then go to the full Senate for a vote before they get installed in their positions and the new Trump administration after January 20th.
Thanks, Wes.
Yep.
Yeah, so new people in new seats. Of one thing that caught our eye lately is the right where President-elect Trump has indicated that former Congressman Billy Long is his designee to lead the IRS. Current IRS commissioner's term is not quite up, but it seems like that decision has also been made by the president-elect. Congressman Long currently is associated with helping and encouraging organizations to claim the employee retention tax credit. Something that is, a real advocacy success for the nonprofit sector, but that has also become a bit of an oversight problem for the IRS and for Treasury as a whole. So that's certainly an issue that could cut a few different ways for our sector, and something we'll be watching closely.
Yes, just to comment on that, as you point out, it's already kind of been a topic of discussion and will be, right. So he'll have to go through a process, the Senate Finance Committee with a hearing and then a committee vote. So I'd imagine that you're already seeing some press reports about his background there. And so I'd imagine the ERC will be a discussion point as part of his confirmation process in the Senate Finance Committee next year.
Questions about the continuing resolution and the state of government funding? Questions about committee leadership, committee membership, administration nominees? Two other things that we want to put on your radar and make sure to update you on this afternoon. One is HR 9495. We spent a fair amount of time on this topic, anti-terrorism legislation that contains some really concerning due process limitations for nonprofits potentially losing their C3 status. And again, we spent a fair amount of time on this last month, and just wanted to update that there have been no significant developments on that since the House of Representatives passed it by a rather narrow margin in late November. So there you have it. We'll continue to remain vigilant. It certainly seems to be dead for this Congress, and next Congress will be new opportunity for everyone. Reconciliation will be a major tax focus, as we've detailed and discussed in depth previously. It's an open question as to whether a provision like this could procedurally fit on a reconciliation bill, and or whether it would be a priority for tax committee leadership. I will note that the bill was referenced in a report that House Republican leadership and committee leaders released around their efforts to prevent anti-Semitism across a wide range of committees. It was not part of the recommendations released by that report today, but it is referenced as part of their efforts. So certainly something that is still on our radar and on House Republicans' radar in particular. The last thing we wanted to be sure to update you on, because you're independent sector members, you would have received your weekly digest email last Wednesday, updating you that we are proud to have relaunched the nonprofit sector state profiles. We've put a link in the chat. Thank you, Manuel. In addition to Manuel sharing this in the chat, Manuel is the visionary and the architect behind developing this project. And so this is an interactive dashboard with national and state by state data about nonprofit organizations, about the finances of nonprofits, about their impact, their jobs impact, but also about their workforce, both paid workforce and volunteer workforce. It draws on publicly available data, most of which is federal government data from the census and the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and the IRS, and AmeriCorps, but also draws on independent sector's own value of volunteer time data released every April. So we encourage you to take a look at that. We believe it's useful to researchers and to policy makers who are looking to understand the sector better. But we sincerely hope that it continues to be useful to advocates who are making the case for our sector and trying to help policymakers understand its impact, its importance, its needs. So again, you're IS members, you should have received that. And because you're members, you also have access to the PDF of the full 4-page profile for the US and for the whole state. You can contact membership at independentsector.org for that information. So, has anyone figured out what's happening with government funding since we started? Now 33 and a half hours until a government shutdown, if you're setting your watches. Not seeing any further questions. Again, we know you all have a lot of work to get done and a lot of other things to get done in the rest of your lives this time of year. So we want to let you get back to it. Grateful to you, Wes, grateful to Manuel for joining us today, and grateful to all of you for the work you do. This is a season of giving and gratitude, and we couldn't be more grateful for your partnership, your membership, and your support. Thanks for your kind words, Shelley. Let's stay in touch. Fun times ahead.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, Wes.